What's that? You can't remember the full name of the Imola Grand Prix either? Well, let's get started.
Another race for the world's greatest driver, Juan Manuel Fangio.
Former world champion Jim Clark leapt into the lead. That's Clark's Lotus going like a bomb.
And James Hunt is the world champion by just one single point.
By being a racing driver, you are under risks all the time. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
And that is Michael Schumacher ahead, the world champion.
To become a four-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, champion of the world.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible.
Max Verstappen is champion of the world.
Oh my God! Max Verstappen, you are the world champion! The world champion!
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of F1 in Review. I'm Tristan Fancourt and I'm joined by Angus Gallager. Tom can't be with us today. He is on holiday, so I'm sure he'll be tuning in to listen to this podcast. So, hi Tom, in Paris. I hope you're enjoying yourself. So you've just got myself and Angus to guide you through the week's worth of topics before we head on over to the Imola Grand Prix, a Grand Prix which many of us will be looking forward to. It has delivered some spectacular crashes and interests over the last few years when they brought it back. And if you can't remember the full name of this Grand Prix, well, I would say that it is the longest of the season by far. The full name is the Formula One Qatar Airways Grand Premio del Made in Italy dell'Emilia Romagna 2023 Grand Prix. Blimey, they had to add Made in Italy halfway through, which
unnecessary,
absolutely. And it also, as a bit of trivia, holds my favourite track corner name of anyone in any track in the season, and that is the Acqua Minerale corner,
yes,
which translates to mineral water, in case that I wanted to pass you by. But before we go towards Imola, hurtle towards the barrier, which could well be the upcoming rainstorm for that particular track, I think we should talk about the trail end of the Miami Grand Prix. We spoke last week about some of the winners from the previous race, but we may want to talk about some of the losers too. So, Angus, let's talk about McLaren, shall we?
Yes, let's.
A team that promised so much going into the Grand Prix. I don't know if you saw the demonstration of their upgrades that they were bringing, but they basically circled the whole car, so we're upgrading everything. But unfortunately, it didn't really turn out like that during the race. What should we say? It was a disappointing ending. So, for a team that promised to be near the front but ended up being at the back, what went wrong?
I mean, it's a very similar pattern, isn't it, for McLaren for the last 2 years, and that they've got into it with big promise, because in 2021 they had a very strong year with Lando Norris doing his Lando Norris things, and then Daniel Ricciardo winning that race. Last year started off with big hopes, but the car was pretty shoddy, and then it kind of improved as the year went on, and they managed to scrape themselves into a battle for fourth with Alpine. And then this year, same again, the car's a bit rubbish. Do you remember the point over the winter where they said that, well, we've missed our upgrades, and this is in like January, and at that point you think, okay, not great, and it really isn't great. I think that they are they're just struggling, aren't they? And they've had this, you may have seen the news before, was it before Miami or Azerbaijan, where they have this technical reshuffle. So they've released James Key, who was their technical director, basically McLaren's version of Adrian Newey. And usually when that happens, that's because if a car's slow, the heads that roll are either team principal or the main technical director or technical main designer. So no surprise that his head has rolled. I think the McLaren as well, we have to remember that the big change they had over the winter with the departure of Andreas Seidel. I remember we said at the time, when it came at the back end of the last season of F1 in Review, when you had the silly season and half the teams changed team principals. And we remember us saying, does Andreas Seidel leaving McLaren out the blue mean something's wrong? And with hindsight, it's fair to say that it's almost like he knew something, isn't it? It's like he knew something was coming over the hill, which didn't look too great and made him jump ship to the new Audi project. 17th and 19th in Miami is really poor. From 16th and 19th on the grid, and they just seem to really lack pace. And yeah, like you said, all these upgrades, no purchase for it at all. I mean, it's looking pretty bleak, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I think there's now speculation, isn't there, about Lando Norris's future in McLaren.
Yes.
When there was an interview with Zach Brown last week, he confirmed that there's zero exit clauses in Lando Norris's contract. And he goes on to say that ultimately, when his contract is next up, if we're not performing and he doesn't feel he can win races and compete for the championship, then I think anybody, driver or team member, would consider leaving. So I would have thought that Lando Norris's departure is going to be on the team's mind. In some ways, I think it kind of parallels Alonso being there in the late 2015 season, and everyone's sort of thinking, well, he's a good driver in a poor car. This isn't going to last.
Yeah, and Norris is. I think we've been over it. I definitely bang on about it. He's an extremely talented driver, and I think that he is deserving of a place further up the grid. And the longer he has to wait for that, the more impatient he's going to get. He's done 87 F1 races, and he's yet to win a race. And yes, I know he's had a couple of occasions, most famously in Russia 2021 when he was leading and then agonisingly dropped off at the end when he didn't come in for tyres at the right time. But I mean, it's just not been what he wanted from that car. It's not been what he wanted in terms of wanting a race-winning car. The times when he's been up near the front is times when he's had to drag it himself. And the one time when it was a race-winning car in Monza, Daniel Ricciardo took the accolades. So yeah, he's going to be getting more and more impatient, I'd say, as time goes on, because he's a very talented driver, and he will be impatient. He will see as well similar drivers of a similar age to him, such as Russell, such as Leclerc, Verstappen as well, having more success further up the front, and he'll want a piece of that. And he'll back himself. He'll think, I'm as talented as these guys. I want to be up there and fighting at the front. I'd be interested to know, do you know when his contract runs out? Because Zach Brown's saying that if at the next contract renewal the car is still not up to shape, he can leave. Now, when would that be? Is it 24, 25?
2025.
2025.
Yeah.
So
it's quite a long contract, but 2 years.
Yeah.
From now.
Yeah, I don't think he'd take 2 more years of being in the midfield. By then he'd have been in F1 for 7 years and then not made much of an imprint. I think there could be some movement in the drive market over the next year or so, because you'll have Hamilton retiring at some point. You'll have Alonso. I know he's a machine continuing, but he'll retire at some point in the next few years, I reckon. And then you got Leclerc saying in the press conference before Miami or Azerbaijan, saying that he hadn't had talks with Mercedes yet. I don't know why he said it yet. It must have been a language barrier thing, because he's opened a whole can of worms there.
Yeah, I know.
But Lando Norris would be in that discussion. I mean, was it 2021 or 22 where Perez was struggling a bit at Red Bull, and Christian Horner went and spoke to Lando Norris to try and get Verstappen and Norris in Red Bull. So, and Norris turned them down, stay at McLaren. Yikes! But
well, I mean, that's rumoured. Yeah. We're not totally sure whether or not any offer. That was the rumour at the time, and clearly it would have been a great career move, wouldn't it, if he had actually decided to do that? But, Red Bull certainly won't be ditching Perez now.
No, and I mean, these are all rumours and speculation, but I mean, it's fair, because it's really obvious to anyone who follows F1 that he's sticking out like a sore thumb in that McLaren team, and I think that the one thing for him is he has to make sure that whilst the car is as bad as it is, his performance levels don't drop. He doesn't let it slip, and he doesn't sort of start sulking, and then as a result he can't progress, because people have people tend to have recency bias. They will be more favourable towards what's happened more recently. So unless he keeps on churning out those good results, people will forget the goodwill and the reputation he built up by doing all the by having the success he did when he had those set of podiums, when he got that pole as well at Sochi. So he has to keep on it almost to make sure that people don't...
of brilliance.
Yes, exactly. He has to sort of keep it up so that people don't go, oh, Lando Norris, he's like struggling at the moment. They have to go, oh, remember when Lando Norris did so well in that McLaren car? He has to keep that reputation high if he wants to get that move.
Yeah, but I think part of the issue now is let's take an example of a driver who was making great strides in a poor car, George Russell, when he was in the Williams and he was getting into Q3 and he got the nickname Mr. Saturday, and he was consistently getting a car that should not be in Q3 into Q3, getting points for it, absolutely stomping over his teammates, Nicholas Latifi, demonstrating that he was ready for the move up. To some extent, Norris has got a bit of an issue now, certainly a bit of an issue when it comes to his own press, because he came blasting into the sport off the successes of his junior career into a team that we would consider to be one of the medium to big dogs, a team that put people like Lewis Hamilton into the ranges of success. And if you look at the car and a team like that and you go, oh, well, he's in Q3, it's sort of expected. And so it's really hard, especially for me, it's really hard for me to separate like McLaren of old when they were really top dog, fighting and beating other teams like Renault and Ferrari, to the McLaren now, which is, so should we be expecting it to get to Q3? And for a team to fall back so far to the point where we're getting excited about, a Q3 or a Q2 appearance would be such it would be such a step backwards, and it would be to my dismay, because there are standout moments in sort of McLaren's history in the last, well, in my viewership at least, and those were petered off as we sort of reached the 2010s and then into 2015. The only thing I really remember about that sort of season when Alonso was there and they were at the back of the pack was that occasion when Fernando Alonso managed to stick on a pair of dry tyres in one of the qualifying sessions that was drying out. It got to got into from Q3 into Q2 and everyone went nuts. And then of course, track dried out and they were at the back of Q2, but bit of good luck. And so they would have to fall back to that point. And I can't see Lando Norris sticking around and being part of a team that cannot perform at least in the midfield. And maybe that's why they seem to be sweetening him up a bit. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw today, well, that's when I saw it at least, McLaren gave Lando Norris his new custom-made McLaren 765 LT Spider, which is covered in bits of green and things like that. It cost $280,000 apparently, going to the sources that I saw.
Wow.
They are certainly opening the cookie jar for him. My advice to any potential McLaren owner is don't keep it outside in the wet for too long, because the NOx sensors go. And also, hopefully, it won't be like McLaren's I know and break down a lot. But I guess Lando Norris can afford the bill, right? I guess that's the advantage.
He should be all right.
Yeah, he'll be all right there. But they're not the most reliable cars. It's been like being given a Lotus. You think, oh, it's very kind, but I did like my wallet being closed. Anyway, so I think they are going to run into some issues. And whilst we're talking about McLaren, and clearly we're now speculating about Lando Norris, I think listeners, you will make up your own mind whether or not he's going to stay. So what about Piastri? Well, the driver that gave up so much at Alpine and decided to burn the bridges there, do you think he's going to stick around? And here's another rumour, seems like this is going to be an episode filled with rumours, I believe. Do you think McLaren are going to Van Dorn him? And what I mean by that is keep him on for a season and then dump him. Great driver, but just wrong car at the wrong time, couldn't perform. Look, there's no getting away from it. Piastri has been struggling this year.
I'd say that I think with Piastri, we have to give him a bit of time at McLaren because obviously it's a tricky car to drive. It's not an ideal one to come into the sport with. It's clear that, in my opinion, it's clear that he has lots of talent. He won, not many drivers have won F3 and F2 in their first year in back-to-back years. So it's possibly I think the only ones are George Russell and Charles Leclerc are the only other ones to have done that. And look where they are now. So Piastri has clearly got a high ceiling. It's an interesting one because I remember when he left Alpine, some people are like, oh, he's given up a lot there. Alpine are in a strong position. Will he regret that? Then some people are also like, well, he's going to McLaren. If they produce a great car and his pace is up, then they'll be able to overtake Alpine and then it'll look like a great move. And as it stands, they're both kind of doing a bit rubbish. They're both not. They've been massively leapfrogged by Aston Martin in terms of being the team to take the fight to the big three, leaving McLaren and Alpine to fight over scraps with Haas and Alfa Romeo.
Yeah. So
it's like he can't be unhappy with this situation because the team that he left is worse than I'd say. Alpine is. Well, actually, no, Alpine had a good last race in Miami.
So right, he's given up a better car, but for maybe what we would say is maybe a slightly more functional team at the moment. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that Alpine last year as a team I know they had a quick car, but they should have wrapped up that 4th place much earlier, I think. And also that off the track, it was just a mess because the whole Otmar Safnauer are telling Piastri that in front of mechanics. In the simulator that he'd be driving for them next year when Piastri had never verbally agreed to this, and then the whole legal battle, it lasted like 2 weeks, but it was still a legal battle which cost Alpine. Yeah, they're paying £500,000 to McLaren's legal fees. Oh, and giving them your driver as well. So Alpine was a bit of a mess in some parts last year, and obviously losing Alonso as well, losing their superstar driver and their superstar youngster. So he's probably gone, arguably, I'd say, to a more stable team, other than if you disregard the whole personnel changes at the moment at McLaren. But I don't know. I think that if he's going to get the success that maybe he wants, he's going to have to hope that one of your top 4 at the moment has a look at him and picks him up from the lower down the grid, and you get sort of promoted to a bigger team, because I don't think McLaren are going to be making their way up the field that way anytime soon. But yeah, will they Van Dorn him? I like to use the verb to Van Dorn. To Van Dorn. To Van Dorn. I presumably just meaning to promote someone into a team with great fanfare and then unceremoniously dump them after a relatively short period of time. Yeah,
and probably for reasons that they didn't deserve either. The car was terrible with Van Dorn, wasn't there?
With Van Dorn, the thing was, like, he was hailed as like the next generational talent, but then he got absolutely destroyed by a 36, 37-year-old Alonso in a very, very, very mediocre car both years, admittedly, but Van Dorn got absolutely obliterated. I want to say that in his second year, Van Dorn lost like 20-0 in qualifying to Alonso, which for generational talent, it's Alonso, but you want to beat him at least 5 or 6 times if you were.
Stroll's probably going to get a similar tally this year.
Yeah, exactly. Stroll will get 4 or 5 in qualifying against Alonso, possibly, but possibly. But yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like they'd have a bit more faith in Piastri. If they put in as much effort as they did to get him to sign for them in the first place, and to also remember extract Daniel Ricciardo from a expensive contract, I like to think they'd have some faith in him, but I don't know. Also, I think Piastri has age on his side. He's only 22, I think. Whilst Van Dorn, yes, he was promoted, but he was a little bit older. He was like 25, 26 when he started in F1. So I think Piastri has that on his side. But yeah, until the next hot thing, the next hot talent, hot prospect from GP2, from F2 or F3 comes along,
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think Piastri, that can always change because times move on quickly and drivers can be the next best thing. Then a year later, they are yesterday's news. But I don't know. I think they keep Piastri. I mean, it'd be silly to ditch Piastri, but I think just McLaren's just looking like just a bit of a mess, really.
Absolutely, and given that Piastri currently has 4 points to Lando Norris's 10, he's going to have to stand his ground a bit to the McLaren darling.
Quite possibly.
But as we speculate from driver to driver, especially in McLaren's future, I mean, we'll both keep a wily eye. As a McLaren fan, it makes me sad that they're going backwards, and unfortunately, they may be moving back towards the mid 2010s, the teens, 2015, 2016 sort of period when McLaren was particularly poor. Unfortunately, they may be moving back that way. However, from one rumour train to the next, all aboard the rumour train as we head on over to AlphaTauri. And this one took me back a bit this week, and that was the rumour that a certain Daniel Ricciardo may be in line to replace Nick de Vries. By the way, I'm caveating this topic before you start getting angry on the comment section with a big disclaimer. This is just rumours and it's interesting to talk about. So now we can continue. But a certain Daniel Ricciardo could well be, perhaps, maybe, replacing Nick de Vries at AlphaTauri because Nick de Vries seems to be underperforming and Red Bull are ruthless. Now, this was originally a little bit of an outside rumour. I would say it was a bit out there. And then it was revealed that Daniel Ricciardo was getting a seat fitting. Now, given that he's a reserve driver for Red Bull and the Red Bull group that AlphaTauri are part of, then this would make sense. However, it is slightly unusual to be getting a seat fitting, and has further fanned the flames of rumour that Ricciardo could well be going there. So, Angus, the questions I have really to discuss on this topic is Nick de Vries doing enough to save his seat? Is Red Bull mad enough or sensible enough to ditch him now, to maybe Van Dorn him, if we're going to add in the verb again? And do you think Daniel Ricciardo would take the AlphaTauri seat, knowing the performance of the car isn't great?
I'll answer one of the questions first. Are Red Bull sensible enough? Is Dr. Marco sensible? I don't think so. I think it would be right up his street to do a move like this. I think that Helmut Marko buys I reckon he has a season ticket on the rumour train. I think. Yeah, he definitely commutes on it. So Daniel Ricciardo, it's interesting because lots of people have been referring to a comment he made, which is partly the reason why he turned down the Haas seat. So it was him versus Nico Hülkenberg for the Haas seat last season, which was kind of the last remaining seat on the grid, and he was rumoured to be saying that he wouldn't go because he wanted a race-winning car. He wanted or at least a car that could compete. So, based on that, AlphaTauri are nowhere near a race-winning car. They're nowhere near. I mean, they got Yuki Tsunoda's finished 10th twice this season, and that is their only points which they've picked up. The high they had was when Tsunoda came, I think it was 8th in qualifying, would have been in Azerbaijan in one of the qualifying sessions. So that's the one sort of high it's had in terms of its pace this year. But otherwise, that car is the 9th fastest, possibly even the 10th fastest, when the Williams is in the hand of Alex Albon. So would Ricciardo go there? I mean, if he changed his tune from last year, yes, he would. But if he stuck to his words, then he'd turn that down, no? Because it's not a race-winning car.
Yeah.
And, yeah, to be honest, I don't know about you. I think it's weird to picture Daniel Ricciardo in AlphaTauri. But like when Daniel Kvyat went from Red Bull to AlphaTauri. For a while, it was just weird because it was like this guy was in a Red Bull a few minutes ago, and now he's been demoted back to the junior team. So I can't see it personally. Can you?
No, I don't. I don't see it actually. I think Daniel Ricciardo would be holding out for a Red Bull seat, but I wonder whether or not he sees it as a gateway car, a bit like a gateway drug, I guess. Strongest of his AlphaTauri is a gateway car from mid spec to top spec of F1. It's difficult because AlphaTauri's never really been a race-winning car. The last win they had was with Pierre Gasly, and he managed to win in the car. And that was a special occasion, a sort of a one-off, and things have to really, really go right. And that was when AlphaTauri, we may speculate as well, was at the peak of their game. They actually were rivaling the performance of cars they really shouldn't have been at the time, and that's because that was the end of the last season regulations, the regulations that were in force until the end of 2021. And now, of course, they are certainly, I don't want to say at the back, but they're pretty much at the back. They've lost all performance. So for Daniel Ricciardo to go there, certainly it would be against his word that he wants to be in a race winning and certainly a championship car. There's no chance. However, what it would do is give him the chance to prove how good he is. A bit like how Russell made his name in Formula One through his excellent performance in Williams. Maybe Daniel could see this as his chance to demonstrate that what was going on at McLaren, what was going on at Alpine, when he was not necessarily where he was supposed to be, it was just a blip, because he went from the great highs of brilliance at Red Bull down to the lows. And actually, maybe he sees this as a gateway back into the big team, especially once Perez decides to not be there anymore, or Max decides not to be there anymore.
Yeah, it's he's got a reputation to rebuild, I'd say. Like he's had a tough couple of years at McLaren, which has led to him going out the sport altogether. And he's 33 years old. He's turning 34 soon, I think, maybe in the summer at some point. He's got a reputation to rebuild. He's also got to try and make sure that he's not wasting those last few years of his career, and this could be a way back into it for him. I would like, though, if this does happen, spare a thought for Nick de Vries. I mean, the poor guy, he's just he's come back in to that AlphaTauri seat after that brilliant drive for Williams last year, and to be honest, he's been nowhere. He's not been anywhere. He's been off the pace. He's crashed a few times in fact, and he's just looked out of sorts. And I think Franz Tost has started getting into him early doors, as Franz Tost does, because he's a very honest, no filter man. Doesn't mince his words, and I think that it would just be harsh on de Vries. I think that with F1 drivers, you need to give them at least a season. Because it's the same with lots of jobs. You spend a year in a job, and then when the next year comes round, your routines are there. You're used to things. You know the people better than ever. So, I mean, I think it'd be very harsh to dump him after. Prospectively, they're going to give him 3 more. They're going to give him Imola, Monaco, and Spain, and then if it's not any better, then they'll replace him with Ricciardo. By the way, giving him Monaco out the 3 to be like, yeah, you've got to up your game, Nick. Now here's the world's tightest street circuit. No pressure.
Yeah, it's so bad.
I'm not sure about that, but I don't know. I think it'd be really harsh, but I think it has come at the same time as we have admitted and we've acknowledged on this podcast. Tsunoda has upped his game this year. He has or maybe de Vries is awful and Tsunoda is being made to look like incredible.
Well, he's only on 2 points, and let's face it, the AlphaTauri car this year is just rubbish. It is rubbish. It's slow.
It's pretty awful. They've really gone. It was that year, like you said, when Gasly won. Admittedly, it was a bit of a fluke, but it was a strong car. And then the year after, when you had Gasly and it was Tsunoda's first year, Gasly was unbelievable, and he got that podium in Baku. I think he was consistently up there with the Ferraris and the McLarens in the battle, in his own personal battle for 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. I think Gasly on his own may have come 5th in the Constructors in that year. But the point being, he was performing exceptionally, but the car was very good as well. It was definitely clear of the Alpine and the Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And they've just dropped off, and now they're fighting right at the rear. It's like these new regulations that came in last year have just really thrown them off course. And yeah, it's just, and this isn't helping de Vries' cause. Hence why the rumours are spreading. Rumours travel fast in F1. The silly season has started already in mid-May, and like we said, there could be a change. I think it'd be harsh, but I'm not inside the brain of Dr. Helmut Marko, so what can I say?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, what was weird about that Grand Prix where Pierre Gasly won, that was the 2020 Monza Grand Prix. I think, it was a real turning point for the teams, perhaps, because you had Pierre Gasly on top step of podium first, Carlos Sainz in a McLaren in second, and Lance Stroll in the Racing Point in third. And maybe Lance Stroll in the Racing Point being on the podium wasn't too much of a surprise. But, that was certainly AlphaTauri sort of peak, part of the McLaren peak. 2021, they would go on to actually win it, right? So Monza was the great for McLaren then, and AlphaTauri also, that sort of peak, and they've both fallen since then. So AlphaTauri has obviously come a long way from then and fallen back in the pack. And I completely agree. I think for the moment, unfortunately, it's going to be pure speculation. I don't see Red Bull dumping and AlphaTauri dumping Nick de Vries after just a few races. As you say, let him settle in for a year. But I think eyes are now on him for the wrong reasons. And I don't know whether or not it's just that we expect drivers just to be excellent in the first race, because that's what we have come to expect now from the fact that other drivers seem to be able to do that. I mean, let's face it, George Russell hasn't exactly struggled. For example, going to Mercedes, Lando Norris was pretty much good from the get-go. Alonso is taking on his new role at Aston Martin with such a degree of excellence. He's basically life coaching Lance Stroll along the way, which is just crazy. But as we go from, I would suspect, the highs of AlphaTauri at one Italian Grand Prix to the upcoming Grand Prix in Imola, it's time for us to put on our hats of speculation, wave our magic wands of prediction, and give our own often incorrect insights into some of the dramas that may unfold at this upcoming race. Now, it's important to note that the winner of the race, and as I kick off this speculation, could be someone completely unexpected. It may well be Bert Mailander, the driver of the F1 safety car, because it is predicted, Angus, to be horrendous weather at this upcoming race. Now, Imola is often unforgiving in the wet, and has led to some serious dramas before, such as George Russell crashing into Bottas in the wet weather, and George Russell crashing behind a safety car at Imola in the wet weather. Actually, just George Russell causing all the drama at Imola in the bad weather. But if that's the case, if it is bad weather, which it is predicted to be, if it's not Bert Mailander, the safety car driver, winning, Angus, who could it be?
I was going to say, I saw the reports about the weather, and you may have, I don't know if you saw, but just before I came on, I was having a quick look at the F1 news, and basically today it was such torrential rain in the paddock that the personnel who'd arrived at the paddock early doors before the weekend had to evacuate the paddock. Such was the flood risk. So
crazy.
If that's not an omen for the weekend, I don't know what is. Now, last time I did a prediction, I predicted Nico Hülkenberg to finish on the podium and Logan Sargent to finish in the points, neither of which got anywhere near happening. So I'm going to go the complete opposite way and err on the side of caution this time. But if it's a wet race, we've had rain in the last two races at Imola, haven't we? Because we had, like you said, the year where Bottas and Russell crashed, that was wet to dry.
Yeah.
And then last year started off in the wet and then was dry at the end. So we could have a similar thing this weekend, sorry. I just pray, honestly, that they don't just put it behind the safety car for any drop of rain like they seem to have done in recent years. Remember Singapore last year, was it? Or Monaco, one of them. They just basically just went behind the safety car until it dried up.
Well, there was a number of examples. I mean, Spa as well back in 2021 is stuck in my mind because
they just gave up after 2 laps.
Yep.
So let's hope not to have that. But in the event that we don't have that and we have a proper race, I'm going to say, I don't want to be boring and say Verstappen's going to win. So I'm going to say that...
Well, you can have one. You have a conservative and then a fun one, eh? There we go. We'll balance out because Tom isn't here to give his opinions.
I'm going to say Verstappen will be the winner because, to be fair, his wet weather skills are excellent and it's possibly one of his greatest assets, all his greatest differentials from the rest of the field. I'm going to say we're going all podiums. We said we'll go with that. So second, I'm going to say Charles Leclerc is going to put in a good performance in the wet. Give the Ferrari fans something to cheer about at one of their 2 home races. And third, I'm going to say Perez third.
That's an interesting one. And for your wild card winner,
my wild card winner, I'm going to say he's actually surprisingly good in the wet. Lance Stroll.
Oh, I was going to say Lance Stroll. Damn, you got there first. Well, I do agree, but I'll go different. Well, so if it is terrible weather, then you've already taken Max Verstappen. So I think it's going to be Alonso. I think Racing Point could well repeat what they did in 2020 Turkey when Racing Point at the time, now Aston Martin, ended up being on pole position and having a great race until, well, things went a little bit wrong for Lance Stroll, who had his only chance, I think, so far to win. So I think Fernando Alonso, great in the wet, and perhaps that Aston Martin car can shine through just a little bit. Then I think it's going to be Verstappen and then Perez. And then for a wild card winner, if it's not Alonso, because I guess Alonso falls not into wild card anymore, which is just crazy for me. I think it's going to be George Russell creating drama for all the right reasons as he comes along and wins. In my heart of hearts, I would have loved to have said Norris as a redemption for Sochi 2 years ago, but clearly that's not going to happen. So instead, I'll go with George Russell. Norris
has history here. He's got on the podium the last 2 times we've been to Imola. He was the only, last year at Imola, it was the only non-Ferrari, Red Bull and Mercedes podium all season, which is a little bit depressing, I think. But
yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's probably going to be a step too far simply because the McLaren is rubbish.
And that's all we've got time for on this episode of F1 in Review. Thank you very much for tuning into the 30th episode. Unlucky for some, but hopefully not unlucky for us. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode, as we've arrived at our destination of the Rumour train as we move towards the Imola Grand Prix. I won't repeat the name of it because I think we'd be here all day. But as we move towards the upcoming Italian Grand Prix in Imola, we shall give you some timing. So 3 o'clock on Saturday is the qualifying, at 2 o'clock on Sunday for the Grand Prix itself. That's if you're listening or watching the race in the UK. Now, we will be back next week to discuss the fallout from what could well be one of the wettest washout races of the season, as we've departed from the Middle Eastern tracks and from the US tracks as well. We're now going towards the tracks where we do expect some wet and wild weather, and this one could be the wettest and wildest of this season. So fingers crossed that we will actually get some racing. Hopefully it won't be a quote-unquote washout and dampen all our moods as they have to evacuate due to a flooding risk. But only time will tell. Will it be a safety car finish, or will it be Fernando Alonso's shot at victory? One of a few shots perhaps this year. Do tune in next week as we discuss what we're about to see for this upcoming weekend, and enjoy the race.